what we're going to do is we're going to start by talking about the possibilities. I wanted to share with you some of the really fascinating trends that we're seeing in cloud computing that are directly impacting accessibility in a very positive way. So let's take a look at some of those examples. So let's start with our Lucy example. What I'm displaying right now is just a very beautiful photo of Limone sul Garda. It is located in the Lombardia region of Italy. That's in northern Italy. What we're seeing is that there is a project called Lucy that has launched, and it is the first large-scale deployment of cloud-based assistive technologies and services for persons with disabilities in northern Italy. What it does is it provides a way for people of all abilities to be able to access free of charge an initial set of cloud-based assistive features and applications. So this is based on open source, which is software that is freely made available for others to be able to use, and it also has some proprietary aspects, some proprietary assistive software that covers all types and degrees of disability. So this is software that will help people, for example, to be able to hear what's displayed to their screen. There's a screen reader application. There's a way of zooming the text so that if you have poor vision or low vision, you're able to increase the size of the font to be able to see it. And the way this works is that people sign up for these accounts and they share their personal abilities and their personal needs, and they select and describe what it is they need to have access to in this environment to help them when they're interacting with computers. Now, the nice thing about this is that wherever they go, all they have to do is log into their account and they have access to the assistive technologies and to the applications that will help them to be able to interact and participate and be involved in that particular situation. So for example, if somebody goes to a library and sits down at a computer in the library, they're able to log on to their Lucy account, and Lucy understands already what their needs are. Lucy provides to them the tools that they need. This is really exciting, not just for the person who has the disability, but it's also wonderful for the person who runs the library, because they no longer are trying to figure out what they should be providing for their customers. Their customers are bringing that with them, and it is exactly what their customers need and what they're familiar with. Otherwise, the library might provide a set of assistive technologies and applications that are completely different from what the person with a disability is used to. So this is really great for, again, persons with disabilities and for all of the organizations that are providing access to computers. Now, this is a project that is participated in by 23 towns in northern Italy. So any town that you go to, you have access to Lucy. And this is, again, this is a project that changes accessibility across northern Italy. A very exciting project that leverages cloud computing in a very positive way for persons with disabilities. What I want to do next is look at a larger project where cloud computing is improving accessibility. GPII is the Global Public Inclusive Infrastructure. What they're doing is they are taking a look at inclusive technologies delivered through the cloud from a global perspective. So they're bringing together consumers with disabilities. They're bringing together the inclusive computing technology and assistive technology companies. They are bringing together employers, educators, government agencies, and others to work together to deploy this global public inclusive infrastructure. One of the really interesting things, though, here is that GPII is expanding the concept of special assistive technology and disability access features. What they're doing is they're looking at the broad array of needs, not specifically or only those needs of persons with disabilities, but they're saying everybody at some time or another is going to have a special preference. And they're also looking at challenges and trouble with products due to things like, as we said, disability, but also things you might not have thought of, like literacy or age-related barriers. On this theme of cloud being used for both traditional disabilities and situational disabilities, we'll talk just a bit more about situational disabilities. Here's an example just to reinforce what a situational disability is. This gentleman, as you can see, he's driving down the road and he has his cell phone in his hand, one hand, his other hand is on the wheel, and he's using his eyes, and clearly this is not a good example of what we should be doing. When we're driving, essentially, if we're not exhibiting the behavior this gentleman is exhibiting, we are not using our hands. We shouldn't be using our hands, so we have a mobility impairment in a way, or motor skills impairment there. If we are not using our eyes to look at the device while we're on the road, in that situation we have a visual impairment, or we're situationally blind. So in my line of work in research, many of the same kinds of things that we do to serve people who are blind or people who can't hear or can't use their hands, there are similar actions and activities and things that we can work on to help people who are experiencing these situational disabilities. There's this really nice overlap between the two. With cloud-based text-to-speech services, and I think many of you are probably familiar with those, there are services offered by both Google and Nuance and others. What this does is it takes the text and it converts that into speech so that we can then hear what's happening on our phone without having to take a look at it. So we could read web pages without having to actually look at them. And being able to take what we're saying and have that converted into text. These services are available on the cloud now, and as cloud computing is becoming more pervasive, these services are provided to larger and larger numbers of people. So again, from an accessibility standpoint, we're seeing a growing delivery of these things that were previously considered assistive technologies via the cloud. So what we're really doing is increasing the aperture of what we used to think of as accessibility, and we're broadening that to include a wider range of things that might inhibit communication between people, or interactions between people and systems, or people's ability to be able to effectively use and access content. And we can think of traditional disabilities and we can think of situational disabilities, and we can elaborate on those to address other barriers such as language and culture. So in this area, cloud is also impacting accessibility. I wanted to share with you just a little story of something that happened to me a year and a half ago. I don't know if you can read these signs, but I can't. I do not read Chinese characters at all. My husband and I were in China visiting, and we wanted to get beyond the normal tourist traps. We really wanted to get out and experience more of the local culture. And so we had our little translation dictionary, and we had our maps. We were already familiar with using the subway and the buses and taxis, so we felt fairly comfortable. But we managed to get ourselves entirely turned around. In that situation, my husband and I had a situational disability. We had a language barrier. But today, what we could just as easily do is use a cloud-based translation service. There are cloud-based translation services available where I can ask a question in English. A service delivered on the cloud would convert my request into Chinese so that the other couple would be able to understand, and they in turn could speak in Chinese, and a translation service on the cloud would convert that into English and I would be able to understand them. So I think you can see from the previous slides that cloud computing is significantly impacting accessibility and the availability of assistive technologies. Why is that so important? In the marketplace, we're seeing that consumers and the advocacy groups that speak on behalf of persons with disabilities are increasingly holding organizations accountable for providing an accessible experience. There have been a number of U.S. legal inquiries and litigations since 2008. You can see several organizations depicted here, and we're seeing more and more of this activity here in the United States. Part of the reason for this is this expansion of the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 508 of the U.S. Rehabilitation Act. This is evolving legislation that is driving accessibility into private sector and onto the web. We're seeing an increase in the focus on persons with disabilities and providing them with fair access to the same resources that others are able to easily access. There's also the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, and with that it has become important for providers of video to make sure that all of their video is captioned and accessible. So there's an increasing view there. There's also the UN Convention on Rights of Persons with Disabilities and an executive order to increase the employment of people with disabilities. So, at the same time that we see cloud computing arising and we see these great benefits, we're also seeing this growing focus on accessibility and an expansion of legislation in this area. But this isn't just in the United States. This is a global trend. Globally, we now see that the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, that's been signed now by 153 countries and ratified by 110. There are public policies and government mandates for compliance with content accessibility guidelines standards. These have been embraced by Australia and Canada and China and Japan, the Netherlands, US, UK, and many others. And there's this rapid adoption of the standards, and with that and with the increasing focus on the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, there's also a growing potential for litigation, not just in the United States or Europe, but also in the emerging markets. So all of these, these three trends are really showing that accessibility is having a growing impact, and the activities that we're undertaking in cloud computing to serve people with these assistive technologies will have a growing impact. Let's just take a moment to look at the magnitude of the risk associated with inaccessible solutions. I was really surprised to read some of this, and I thought you might be as well. But the risk has been in the seven-figure, multi-million-dollar US dollar range for enterprises. I'll just pick a couple that you can find in the news. Delta was fined $2 million for violating rules, and Target was sued by the National Federation of the Blind for $6 million. And not only do they have the fine, but they also have future audits. And so these organizations are working very hard to come into compliance with the Americans with Disability Act, and they're trying very hard to embrace content accessibility guidelines standards so that they can provide accessible services to people. But it's not only the seven-figure, multi-million-dollar challenge, it's also the brand impact. That can be even greater. That can be in the billions of dollars range for organizations. So we've seen this increase in litigation and legal inquiries, and the impact is, I think, it's quite astounding.